Captain Iris Donnelly stood at the edge of the observation deck, gazing out at the endless void of space. The stars shimmered, distant and cold, but to her, they held an air of mystery, of something forgotten. The once great human fleets that had once ruled these stars were now little more than shadows, remembered only by the few who survived. Humanity had been erased, wiped from galactic history by the ruthless Z-Corps Empire, their technology, cities, and stories turned to dust. Only a small fleet of exiles, stranded in the far reaches of the galaxy, remained. They were ghosts, wandering without a purpose, lost to time. But today, something had changed. Her communications officer, Lieutenant Mira Solis, walked up beside her, her face pale. "Captain, you need to see this." Iris turned, her gaze hardening. She'd seen too many false alarms in her years as captain of the Argonaut, a derelict ship that had once been part of a proud human armada. "What is it, Lieutenant?" Mira handed her a data pad. "It's a signal, a faint distress call from an unknown system. The signature is human." Iris took the pad and scanned the data, her pulse quickening. It had been years since any human presence had been detected outside the scattered remnants of their colonies. The signal was weak, fragmented, and encrypted with layers of sophisticated coding. But the pattern, it was unmistakable. This was a human signature. "How long has this been active?" Iris asked, her voice steady despite the surge of adrenaline in her chest. "Approximately 3 weeks," Mira replied. "It's been deteriorating ever since, but it's still there." Iris clenched her fists. A glimmer of hope, something she had long since abandoned, flared inside her. This could be the break they needed. For years, they had scoured the edges of the galaxy, searching for clues about humanity's fate, but each search had ended in nothing. No answers, no survivors, just silence. "This could be a trap," Iris murmured, her mind racing. "Or worse, something the Z-Corps left behind to lure us into a kill zone." Mira shook her head. "The signal is not hostile, Captain. It's too weak to be an active threat. Whoever, or whatever, sent it is likely in distress." Iris stared at the data pad, the conflicting emotions swirling in her chest. The Z-Corps had decimated Earth and its colonies with precision, erasing all traces of human civilization. The remnants of humanity had scattered into exile, hiding on the edges of the galaxy, trying to survive against a ruthless enemy that never ceased hunting them. For years, Iris had led her crew in search of any sign, any trace of life, but she had come to accept that humanity's fate had been sealed. But now this signal, this faint whisper, was a lifeline, a thread that could lead them back to what they had lost. "I'm sending a recon team to investigate," Iris decided, her voice cold with determination. "Prepare the crew. We leave at once." Mira hesitated for a moment, concern flickering in her eyes. "Are you sure, Captain? The Z-Corps are everywhere. It's dangerous." "I know," Iris said, her eyes narrowing as she looked out into the vastness of space. "But if there's a chance, if there's even the slightest chance that humanity survived, that it's not just us, then we have to take it." The captain's voice was firm, resolute. She had spent too long in the shadow of despair to turn back now. There was something out there, something human. And if the galaxy had forgotten them, it was time to remind it. As the Argonaut powered up and left its orbit around the barren moon, Iris felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but the faintest whisper in the dark had sparked something inside her. For the first time in years, Iris Donnelly felt the stirrings of hope. Humanity was not finished. Not yet. The Argonaut moved through the darkness of space, its engines purring as the crew prepared for their descent into the unknown. The signal had led them to a system on the fringe of Z-Corps-controlled territory, a place where few ships dared to venture. The planet in question, Veritas IV, was a forgotten world, uncharted in most records, hidden in plain sight. The human distress call had originated from there, a dead world surrounded by the remnants of a long-abandoned colony. Iris stood in the command center, staring at the holomap of the system, her eyes narrowed. The map flickered, the edges of the data clouded with static. "Anything from the surface?" she asked, her voice steady. Lieutenant Mirasolis, sitting at the operations station, glanced up. "No direct communication, Captain. The signal is still intact, but it's weak. Whatever is left down there is isolated." "We're not alone in this system," Iris muttered, tapping her fingers against the armrest. "I can feel it. We're walking into a trap." "We could just be walking into history, Captain," Mira suggested quietly, glancing at the team of officers around her. "What if this place is a remnant of the past? A forgotten colony, left untouched by the Zikor?" Iris didn't respond right away. Instead, her eyes drifted to the viewport, where the barren planet hung in space like a ghost. The ancient colonies that humanity had built had been remarkable, thriving worlds filled with culture, technology, and ambition. But when the Zikor came, those worlds had become nothing more than ashes. The survivors had scattered, abandoned their homesteads, and humanity's glory had been erased from the stars. The memories of those golden years were all that remained. "This isn't nostalgia, Mira," Iris finally said. "This is survival. If this is a trap, we're walking straight into it. But if there's something down there, we need to find out what it is." Her decision was final. The Argonaut began its descent toward Veritas IV, the crew preparing for what might be their first human contact in decades, or their last. Iris's mind raced as they approached the planet. The Zikor's reach was vast, their spies everywhere. If the signal was human, it had to be kept secret. Yet, the possibility of reuniting with any part of humanity, an entire colony even, was too great a chance to ignore. As the ship broke through the thick, gray atmosphere of Veritas IV, the surface came into view, a desolate wasteland of rusted structures and crumbling cities. The planet's once thriving ecosystem had been decimated long ago, leaving only ruins in its wake. In the distance, the faint outline of a large ancient structure loomed, a dark spire reaching toward the stormy sky. The landing was rough. The atmosphere, thick with electromagnetic interference, made it difficult for their sensors to function properly, but they managed to touch down safely. The crew donned their exosuits and prepared for the worst. As Iris stepped out onto the surface, her boots crunched against the dry, cracked earth. The wind carried an eerie stillness, a sense of abandonment that sent a chill down her spine. "I don't like this," Rykos, the former Zikor general who had joined their ranks, muttered as he scanned the area. His cybernetic enhancements made him the perfect scout, but even he seemed unsettled in the desolate landscape. Too quiet, no signs of life. "I'm more concerned about the signal," Iris replied, her voice low but firm. "Whatever's down here, it's not just a colony. It's something more. We need to find the source of that signal." The team split up, combing the area for signs of life, or perhaps more clues about the colony's fall. Iris walked toward the dark spire in the distance, its shadow stretching across the wasteland. She could feel something drawing her toward it, something ancient buried beneath the ruins. The closer they got, the more disorienting the atmosphere became. It wasn't just the silence. It was the feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes tracking their every move. As they approached the spire's base, a low hum filled the air. The signal, it was coming from here, from deep within the structure. "Captain," Mira's voice crackled over the comms. "You need to see this." Iris sprinted toward the entrance. Inside, the walls were covered in strange symbols, faded but still recognizable, human, alien, and something else. The artifacts scattered throughout the chambers were familiar, yet impossibly old. But the most shocking discovery came when they entered the central chamber. In the center stood a massive device, partially buried in the floor. It was no ordinary machine. It was a relic, a piece of lost human technology, gleaming despite the centuries of neglect. And it was here, activated, sending out the signal. The echo. The device had been waiting for centuries, waiting for someone to hear its call. Iris felt a rush of awe and fear. This wasn't just a lost colony. This was humanity's forgotten legacy, its last broken echo in the universe, and someone or something had been trying to bring it back to life. I knew it, Iris whispered to herself. We found it. Iris stood frozen, staring at the massive device. It was old, older than any technology she had ever seen, but unmistakably human in its design. The metallic surface of the machine gleamed under the dim lighting, despite centuries of abandonment. The echo, as she had begun to think of it, thrummed with a low, almost imperceptible vibration. It was sending out the signal, calling to anyone who could hear it. What is this? Mira's voice broke the silence, her words a mix of awe and confusion. Iris could only shake her head. I don't know yet. She stepped closer, inspecting the machine. The walls around them were adorned with alien symbols, scratched markings that spoke of wars fought and lost, alliances broken, and betrayals hidden in the dark corners of the galaxy. The machine seemed to be at the heart of this forgotten place, yet there was no evidence of any survivors. No remnants of human life, no signs of a colony ever having existed. Rykos, his expression unreadable, scanned the surroundings with his enhanced vision. This isn't just a human artifact, he said, his voice low. This was built with the intent to amplify something far greater than just a signal. Iris frowned. What do you mean? It's a weapon, Rykos explained, his tone sharp. This echo, it's capable of more than sending out distress calls. If used correctly, it could rally entire star systems to fight under one banner. It could unite a fractured galaxy, or it could devastate everything in its path. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. The Zikor were ruthless, efficient, and deadly. If they had ever learned of this technology, it could have been used to crush any hope humanity had left. Yet here it was, forgotten, dormant, waiting for someone to activate it. How long has this been here? Iris asked, glancing at the team as they gathered around the device. Centuries, Rykos answered. But it looks like it was abandoned deliberately. The Zikor didn't just wipe out humanity, they erased everything tied to it. This device was likely too dangerous for them to risk letting it fall into the wrong hands. That's why they destroyed the records, wiped the colonies, and hunted down anyone who could have used it. But what does it mean? Mira asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Why would humanity build something like this? It wasn't built by humanity, Rykos said, his eyes narrowing. Not in the way you think. Iris looked at him, confused. What do you mean? Rykos paused, as if weighing his words. The Zikor have been trying to erase humanity's presence in the galaxy for a reason. They didn't just want to subjugate us, they wanted to wipe out our legacy. The echo wasn't just a signal, it was a way to amplify humanity's greatest weapon, its voice. The ability to unite, to inspire, to lead. To make entire civilizations rise and fight as one. It's what made humanity such a threat. The Zikor feared it. Iris stood motionless, her mind racing. This was bigger than she had anticipated. It wasn't just about survival anymore. The echo could be humanity's salvation or its doom. If the Zikor ever learned of its existence, they would stop at nothing to destroy it. But if the remnants of humanity could control it, they might have a chance to rebuild, to rise from the ashes and reclaim the stars that had once been theirs. We can't let the Zikor find out about this, Iris said, her voice cold with determination. We need to keep this secret at all costs. Rykos nodded, though his expression remained grim. The Zikor will come for it. It's only a matter of time. You'll need allies, and the more powerful they are, the better. But don't fool yourself. This isn't a weapon you can wield lightly. It will either unite or destroy. Iris felt a shiver run down her spine. The weight of her decision was becoming clear. To awaken this technology, to make use of it, would take more than just a handful of survivors. They would need allies, strong, formidable allies. And that meant forging alliances with species that had long viewed humanity as nothing more than a distant memory, a shadow in the annals of history. Some of them would never trust her, let alone fight alongside her. "We'll need to reach out," Iris said, looking around at the group. "But we can't trust anyone blindly. We need to be careful. The Zikor are watching, and the wrong move could lead them straight to us." Raiko seemed to consider this for a moment before speaking again. "I know of one who might help. A former ally of mine, a defected general from the Zikor, now leading a ragtag rebellion against them. His name is Kalsar. If anyone knows how to fight the Zikor, it's him. But getting to him won't be easy, and it will take more than just asking nicely." The journey back to the Argonaut was tense. The winds howled through the remnants of Veritas Ivy's broken cities, carrying the scent of dust and decay. Iris's mind churned as they moved quickly, keeping their eyes peeled for any signs of Zikor presence. The echo had been hidden for centuries, but that didn't mean it would stay hidden for long. As they reached the ship, the air seemed to thicken, the weight of the mission pressing down on them. The Argonaut, the last vessel of humanity's fleet, was now their only hope. The ship's bay doors slid open with a soft hiss, and Iris stepped onto the bridge, followed by her crew. The sense of urgency was palpable. Lieutenant Solis quickly set to work, ensuring the Echo was secured in the ship's core systems, while Iris turned to Raikos. "You said we need allies," Iris began, her voice low. "What's our next move?" Raikos was silent for a moment, his cybernetic eye scanning the data screens, analyzing the flight patterns and nearby Zikor fleets. "Kalsar is the key," he said at last, his tone grim. "He's a tactician. If anyone can help us organize resistance, it's him, but he won't just agree to meet with us. He'll need proof that we're not just another band of exiles." Iris leaned against the edge of the command console, fingers tapping thoughtfully. "How do we prove that? We're running on scraps of data and a half-functional ship." Raikos met her gaze, his expression hard. "We have the Echo. That's proof enough. If Kalsar sees its potential, he'll listen. But we need to get to him first," Mira added from her station, her voice laced with concern. "Kalsar's location isn't exactly public. He's been hiding out on a station called The Forge, a lawless outpost on the edge of the Zikor's sphere of influence. It's a place where anyone can disappear, but it's also crawling with enemies." Iris nodded, her eyes narrowing as she considered their options. The Forge. It was a place that only the desperate and the dangerous called home. It was a haven for smugglers, mercenaries, and criminals. In the heart of the Zikor-controlled sectors, it was as close to the edge of the galaxy as you could get without falling off the map entirely. "If we're going to get to him, we'll have to navigate through hostile territory," Iris said. "We can't afford to be detected by the Zikor. The signal from the Echo will be a beacon for them. If we don't stay under the radar, they'll follow us straight to the Forge, and we'll have no way out." "Agreed," Raikos replied, his voice low and steady. "The Zikor won't hesitate to wipe us out if they think we're a threat. But there's a way through their territory, a series of hidden routes through asteroid fields and uncharted systems. I've used them before to avoid detection." Mira's fingers flew over the controls, pulling up star maps and navigation routes. "I'll plot a course, but we'll need to be careful. One wrong move, and we could end up in a Zikor trap." Iris turned to her crew, her eyes fierce. "We don't have the luxury of being cautious. We'll need to take risks, and we'll need to be fast. If we don't make contact with Kalsar soon, we risk losing the only advantage we have. We'll move out in 3 hours." The crew nodded, understanding the gravity of the mission. Every moment counted. The longer they stayed in one place, the higher the chances of detection. They had to leave now, before the Zikor caught wind of their presence. 3 hours later, the Argonaut emerged from the atmosphere of Veritas IV, its engines firing to full power as they broke free of the planet's gravity. The stars stretched into long lines as they entered warp space, the ship's frame vibrating with the force of their departure. As they traveled through the warp lanes, Iris found herself staring out at the darkness. The vastness of space had always been a comfort to her. The idea that, no matter how grim things seemed, there was always something beyond the horizon. But now it was a reminder of how small they were, how fragile the remnants of humanity had become. "We're approaching the first jump point." Mira's voice broke through her thoughts. "If we follow the course you provided, we'll be out of Zukor territory in less than 12 hours. Iris nodded, but the unease gnawing at her wasn't something that could be solved by speed. They were heading into the heart of lawlessness, a place where trust was a commodity you could barely afford. Kelsar might help, or he might try to take the echo for himself. The decision to reach out to him was a gamble, but Iris had no other choice. She turned to Rykos. "You've worked with Kelsar before. Do you trust him?" Rykos' expression darkened. "I've seen him turn on allies before, Captain. He's a survivor first, and a leader second. But if he sees what we have, what the eco can do, he'll understand. He'll know we're not asking for help. We're offering it." Iris let the words settle in her mind. If Rykos was right, they would have one chance to prove their worth. If Kelsar didn't believe in the cause, everything they had fought for would be for nothing. "We'll make him believe," Iris said, her voice resolute. For humanity, the journey through the asteroid fields was nerve-wracking. Iris couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, the eerie silence of space adding to her unease. Every twist and turn of the asteroid belt felt like it could be their last, with Zukor ships lurking just beyond the edge of the map, their sensors probing for anything out of place. But the Argonaut was swift, its advanced cloaking systems masking its signature as they slipped deeper into the dark, uncharted regions. The hours dragged on, but Iris remained focused, standing by the command console. Her crew was alert, each of them preparing for what would come next. The stakes had never been higher. "We're approaching the forge." Mira's voice cut through the tension, her voice laced with both caution and anticipation. "We'll be entering the system in a few minutes." Iris nodded. The forge was a place of contradictions, a haven for the desperate, a marketplace for the outlaws, and a place where alliances were bought and sold. It was as dangerous as it was useful, and getting in would be the easy part. Getting out, alive, was something else entirely. "We'll need to stay low once we're in," Iris said, her voice calm but firm. "Keep a low profile until we make contact with Kelsar. Don't trust anyone, not even the station's security. They'll sell us out the first chance they get." Rykos stood by the viewport, his gaze distant, calculating. "It won't be easy. Kelsar isn't just going to take our word for it. You'll have to prove you can be of use to him. I've seen what he does to those who fail to deliver. He won't hesitate to kill us if we don't come through." Iris glanced at him, his warning clear. "Then we make sure we deliver. No second chances." Mira adjusted the ship's controls, bringing them closer to the station. The massive metal structure loomed ahead, an industrial maze of towering spires and docking platforms. The forge was a chaotic jumble of ships, both large and small, in various states of disrepair. It was a place where anyone could disappear or find exactly what they were looking for. "Docking in 3, 2, 1, Mira announced, her voice steady as the Argonaut made its way toward the station's docking port. The ship shuddered slightly as it locked into place, the noise of the station's inner workings echoing through the hull. Iris exhaled sharply. They had arrived. As the airlock hissed open, Iris and her crew donned their weapons and gear, ready for whatever they might face inside. The forge was a rough place, filled with smugglers, bounty hunters, and criminals who wouldn't hesitate to turn on them the moment they saw an advantage. It was a place where humanity's need for survival was measured in credits, not loyalty. The crew exited the ship, stepping onto the station's metal floors, the hum of machinery reverberating through the halls. The scent of oil, sweat, and cheap alcohol hung in the air. The forge was alive, a place of movement and shadows. Iris could feel the eyes of the station's denizens on them. Mercenaries sizing them up, looking for weakness, and gang members looking for trouble. They moved through the station in tight formation, keeping their heads down. No one spoke as they made their way toward the heart of the forge, the black market. It was the place where the real power of the station lay, the place where Kalsar could be found. It wasn't long before they found it. The black market was a sprawling, dimly lit complex, filled with every kind of weapon, tech, and contraband imaginable. Ships were docked along the walls, each one with its own story, its own price. The scent of smoke and grease was thick in the air, mingling with the sharp scent of explosives and ionized metal. The market was a dangerous, lawless place, but Iris had to trust it was the only way to reach Kalsar. As they approached a corner, a familiar figure stepped into view. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a cybernetic arm and a scar across his face. Kalsar. The former Zakor general stood with his back to them, speaking to a trader, his voice low and measured. There was no mistaking him. The man who had once commanded entire fleets for the Zikor was now the leader of a growing rebellion, far from the eyes of his former masters. Iris didn't hesitate. She walked up to him, the rest of the crew following closely behind. "Kalsar," she said, her voice steady, but her eyes intense. "We need to talk." The former general turned slowly, his eyes scanning them before settling on Iris. There was no surprise, no emotion in his gaze, just the cold calculation of a man who had seen too much to trust anyone easily. "And what makes you think I'll talk to you?" Kalsar's voice was deep, rough, his accent thick with the remnants of his Zikor origins. "You're the last thing I need right now." Iris held her ground, her expression unwavering. "You need this," she said, her hand gesturing subtly to the device that was now safely locked away on the Argonaut. "And we need you." Kalsar's gaze flickered to the others, then back to Iris. A slow smirk spread across his face, but it was devoid of warmth. "And what makes you think I'll trust you? Humanity is nothing but a forgotten relic of the past. You have nothing left to offer but empty promises." "We have the echo," Iris said, her voice firm, her words cutting through the noise around them. The smirk faded. For the first time, Kalsar seemed to consider her seriously. Kalsar studied Iris for a long moment, his expression unreadable. His eyes flickered briefly to the rest of her crew, lingering on Rykos before returning to her. The smirk that had danced on his lips disappeared entirely, replaced by a sharp intensity. He had heard whispers of the echo, a weapon so powerful it could change the course of entire wars. But to hear it from the mouth of a human, that was something else. "You're bold, I'll give you that," Kalsar finally said, his voice low and gravelly. "But boldness won't keep you alive around here. The Forge is a place for survivors, not dreamers. So tell me, Captain, why should I help you?" Iris didn't flinch. She had dealt with men like Kalsar before, soldiers with eyes that had seen too much to trust anyone easily. The stakes were too high for hesitation, and she knew this moment could either make or break everything. "Because you're not the only one fighting for survival," she said, her voice firm. "The Zikor are coming for the Echo, and they won't stop until they've wiped humanity from existence. But we have something they don't, the will to fight, to rebuild. If we don't act now, the galaxy will fall into their hands, and everything we've lost will be for nothing." Kalsar's gaze flickered again, the briefest sign of recognition passing through his cold demeanor. "And you think you can stop them?" he asked, a cynical edge to his voice. "You think humanity can rise up from the ashes and beat the Zikor? You're a relic too, Captain." "We're not just relics," Iris replied, her eyes locking onto his. "We're humanity, and we never give up." There was a moment of silence between them, the weight of her words settling in the air. Kalsar took a slow step forward, his boots echoing on the hard floor of the black market. For the first time since they had met, his gaze softened, a flicker of something almost human passing behind his eyes. He understood. He had been human once too. "You want to fight the Zikor," Kalsar said, his voice more thoughtful now. "But the Zikor aren't the only ones you need to worry about. The forge is a powder keg, and I'm its only fuse. You're stepping into something bigger than you realize. If you want my help, you'll have to prove you can handle the consequences. The black market isn't just a place to hide. It's a place where power is traded, and there's always a price." Iris's heart tightened. She had expected resistance, but this was something else. She had known that Kalsar wouldn't help them out of the goodness of his heart, but the cold calculation in his voice made it clear he didn't trust anyone easily. If they were going to win him over, it wouldn't be with words alone. "I'm not asking for charity," Iris said, stepping closer to him. "We have the Echo, and we're willing to fight. If you want to use it to take down the Zikor or keep your position in this wretched place, then we're all in. But make no mistake, Kalsar, we're not your pawns. We're here to take back what's ours." Kalsar chuckled darkly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I never said you were pawns, Captain. But power comes at a price, and I won't help you without something in return. You want my help? Then show me that you can handle this. Prove to me that you're worth the risk." Before Iris could respond, a voice rang out from behind them, cutting through the conversation like a blade. "That's enough, Kalsar." A tall, wiry man appeared from the shadows, his eyes narrowed, a gun strapped to his waist. He was flanked by two others, both heavily armed. The tension in the air thickened immediately. This was no casual encounter. "I don't trust them," the man continued, his voice sharp and filled with suspicion. "We don't need to get involved with any human rebellion. Not now, not when things are finally under control." Kalsar's expression darkened instantly. "Get out of my way, Jarek." The newcomer didn't flinch, his eyes cold as he locked eyes with Kalsar. "I'm not the one in your way, General. You're the one making a mistake. Trusting these people could cost us everything." Rykos stepped forward, his posture rigid. "We don't have time for this," he said, his voice hard. "We came here to offer you a way to fight back. You know what the Zikor are capable of. If you don't want to join us, then stay out of our way." Jarek's eyes flicked toward Rykos, then back to Kalsar. The tension in the air was palpable, every breath a slow burn. For a moment, it seemed like a confrontation was inevitable. But then Kalsar held up a hand, signaling for silence. The room fell still. He turned back to Iris, his gaze calculating. "Fine," Kalsar said, his voice cold but resolute. "I'll help you. But understand this. I'm not doing this for you, Captain. I'm doing it for me, and for anyone who's still fighting. Don't think I'll go easy on you because you have the Echo. If you want to win, you'll have to pay the price, one way or another." Iris nodded, her expression determined. "We're ready to pay whatever it costs." Kalsar turned toward Jarek and his companions, his eyes steely. "You heard her. Get your crew together. We're making a move, and it starts now." As Jarek grumbled and retreated, Kalsar turned back to Iris, his eyes glinting with something dangerous. "You may have just made a powerful ally, but remember, power always comes with a cost." Iris didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked around the chaotic, vibrant market. The road ahead would be anything but simple, but at least they had a chance. They had the Echo, and they had Kalsar. For the first time in a long while, humanity had something to fight for. The air inside the forge felt thicker now. Iris could feel the weight of Kalsar's words pressing down on her, but there was no turning back. The man had agreed to help them, but only on his terms. She had expected as much. Power in places like this didn't come cheaply. It was won through blood, grit, and the willingness to do whatever it took. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized the rebellion they were about to join had its own battles to fight. It wasn't just the Zikor they had to worry about. It was the fragile alliances that held this broken galaxy together. Are you sure this is the right move? Rykos's voice pulled her from her thoughts as they made their way back to the Argonaut, their mission now set in motion. Kalsar is dangerous, Captain. He'll use you if he can. I know, Iris replied, her voice steady. But right now, we don't have the luxury of turning away from potential allies. The Zikor are too close, and we need to make our stand while we still have time. Rykos didn't respond immediately, but the concern in his eyes spoke volumes. They both knew how this could end. Kalsar had his own plans, his own goals, but the Echo was their bargaining chip, and they couldn't afford to lose it. As they boarded the Argonaut, Mira was already at the helm, fingers flying over the controls. The ship was ready for their next move. The crew had worked tirelessly to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. They had a plan now, at least they had the beginnings of one. We're good to go, Mira called out. The Argonaut is fueled and ready. We just need to get a move on before Kalsar's enemies find us. Iris nodded, taking her seat in the command chair, her eyes scanning the map of the forge and its surrounding systems. Plot the course, she said, her voice calm despite the tension in the air. We need to get back to Kalsar's base. I want to know exactly what we're up against. As Mira worked to set the coordinates, Iris turned to Rykos. What did you mean when you said Kalsar was dangerous? Rykos's expression hardened. I didn't just fight alongside him, I fought against him. Before he became this rebellion leader, he was a Zikor general. He doesn't trust anyone, and the only reason he's fighting now is because he's lost everything. He's driven, Iris, more than anyone I've ever known. And sometimes that kind of determination means he'll do anything to win, even if it means burning everything to the ground. Iris absorbed his words, her gaze steady. That's why we need him, she said. We're outnumbered. We need someone who can fight like that, someone who will do what it takes. Rykos frowned, but didn't argue. He knew she was right. The Zikor weren't just an enemy, they were a force of nature. They couldn't afford to be picky about who they worked with, not when their survival was on the line. The Argonaut lurched as Mira engaged the engines, the stars outside stretching into lines as they entered warp space. The journey would take hours, and every second felt like it brought them closer to a confrontation they weren't fully prepared for. Inside the ship, the crew gathered in the common area, a rare moment of calm before the storm. Iris stood at the head of the table, looking over the gathered crew. I know everyone's nervous about Kalsar, she said, her voice cutting through the unease. But right now, we don't have time for hesitation. We have the Echo, and Kalsar has the power we need to fight back. We can make a difference, but only if we stand together. Mira looked up from her console, her face hard. And if Kalsar decides he doesn't need us anymore, then we deal with it, Iris said firmly. But that's not going to happen. Kalsar's fighting for his own survival, just like we are. He may not trust us, but he'll recognize the value of our fight. And if we show him we're willing to go all in, then he'll come around. Rykos glanced at her, his brow furrowed. And what if he decides to use us as bait? Or worse, he could sell us out to the Zikor. Iris met his gaze, unflinching. Then we deal with that, too. We're not going to let anyone control us, Rykos, not even Kalsar. The words hung in the air for a long moment. Finally, Mira spoke up. We're approaching Kalsar's base, she said, her voice cutting through the silence. We'll be there in 10 minutes. Iris took a deep breath, her eyes narrowing. All right, stay sharp, everyone. This is where it gets real. 10 minutes later, the Argonaut emerged from warp space, and before them stood the station Kalsar had called home, a jagged fortress-like structure, surrounded by a haze of debris and war-torn ships. This was the heart of the rebellion, a place where Kalsar's forces had gathered, a place that would determine the future of the galaxy. As they docked, Iris's mind raced. They had made it this far, but the real challenge lay ahead. Kalsar had given them a chance, but that was all it was, a chance. Whether they survived what came next was entirely up to them. "Everyone, get ready," Iris said, her voice cold and commanding. "We're walking into the lion's den, and we're not leaving without a fight." As the crew readied themselves for whatever lay ahead, Iris took a final look at the ship's viewports. They were at the edge of the galaxy now, at the precipice of everything humanity had fought for. The storm was coming, and they were about to step into its heart. The Argonaut touched down on the jagged docking platform of Kalsar's base with a low, metallic thud. The station was a fortress, its angular design reminiscent of the warships Kalsar had once commanded in the Z-Corps fleet. Smoke and the faint smell of burning fuel hung in the air, and the distant sound of weapons fire echoed through the halls. The rebellion was alive here, fueled by desperation and the single-minded goal of survival. Iris led the crew down the narrow corridor as they exited the ship, her mind focused on the task at hand. The walls of the station were scared, evidence of past battles fought and lost. It was a place of both refuge and ruin, a symbol of the rebellion's unyielding resolve. The tension in the air was thick, every step they took bringing them closer to Kalsar and the truth of his plans. They were met by Kalsar himself, flanked by his most trusted lieutenants. His eyes met Iris's without warmth, but there was something in his gaze now, a recognition of the stakes at hand. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about deciding the future of the galaxy. And Kalsar knew the value of the echo. "I trust you've prepared yourselves," Kalsar said, his voice grim but determined. "The Z-Corps are already moving against us. They won't wait much longer before they strike. And if we don't act now, they'll crush every last one of us." Iris nodded, her hand instinctively going to the device that contained the echo, secured tightly at her side. "We're ready. What's the plan?" Kalsar's lieutenant, a woman with short-cropped hair and a scar running down the side of her face, stepped forward. "We'll need to infiltrate their command ship," she said, her tone cold and efficient. "The Z-Corps have a fleet in orbit above us. If we can get close enough, we can plant a virus in their mainframe, shutting down their command systems. We disable their fleet's coordination, and we've got a shot at taking them down." The plan was risky, reckless even, but Iris didn't hesitate. They had no other choice. This was their moment, the one they had fought for since the first sign of Z-Corps aggression. They had the echo, and with Kalsar's help, they had a chance. "You're right," Iris said, locking eyes with Kalsar. "Let's do it." Within minutes, the crew was preparing for the mission, gathering weapons and gear. Mira was at the helm of the Argonaut, preparing the ship for a swift and undetected flight to the Z-Corps fleet. The rest of the crew checked their equipment, exchanging tense looks as they readied themselves for the fight of their lives. Kalsar's lieutenant handed Iris a small device, a communication relay. "Use this to keep us in contact while you're on the command ship. If things go wrong, we'll be there to extract you." Iris took the device, her fingers brushing against the cool surface. "Thanks." The countdown began, and the Argonaut lifted off from the station, its engines humming as it navigated through the debris field toward the looming Z-Corps fleet above. The tension was palpable. This was no longer just a mission. It was a final stand, a moment where everything they had fought for would either be won or lost. Mira's voice crackled over the comms. "We're in position. The fleet's not detecting us, yet. You have one shot at this, Captain." Iris turned to her crew, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "This is it. We get in, plant the virus, and get out. We're not just doing this for us. We're doing it for everyone who's ever been under the Z-Corps' boot. It's time we take the fight to them." Rykos nodded, his jaw set. "Let's show them what humanity can do." The Argonaut silently moved through the Z-Corps fleet, undetected as it approached the command ship. The massive, dark vessel loomed before them, its hull covered in armor that made it seem like an immovable object. But they had the element of surprise. They had the echo. Iris, Rykos, Mira, and the rest of the crew suited up and prepared to board. As they approached the airlock, the crew's tension reached its peak. The door to the command ship opened, revealing the cold, sterile interior of the Zikor vessel. The air was thick with the scent of metal and ozone. They moved quickly, silently, as they navigated through the corridors. "I'll head to the control room," Iris said, her voice a whisper in their comms. "The rest of you take out any Zikor soldiers we encounter. We can't afford to be detected." They moved through the ship-like shadows, every step calculated and precise. As they reached the heart of the Zikor command center, the door slid open. Inside, a small battalion of Zikor soldiers stood guard. The tension was suffocating. Iris took a deep breath, then gave the signal. Rykos and Mira charged in first, guns blazing, as Iris slipped into the shadows, making her way toward the main console. She had no time to waste. Her fingers flew across the terminal, entering the virus code she had spent hours perfecting. The countdown began. A soft beep echoed in her ear as the virus began to spread. But just as she thought they might succeed, an alarm blared, the lights flashing red as Zikor reinforcements poured into the room. The virus was too late. This was no longer about infiltration. This was about survival. "Captain," Rykos shouted through the comms, "we've got company. Get out of there, now." Iris's heart pounded as she finished the upload. The virus was in. She turned to see her crew fighting off the Zikor soldiers in the hallway, but it was clear that the situation had turned dire. The only option now was to escape and fight every step of the way. The virus began to take effect, and the Zikor command ship started to tremble. The lights flickering as the fleet's coordination began to unravel. But they weren't out yet. The battle for humanity's future was far from over, and every second counted. "Fall back," Iris commanded, drawing her weapon and covering the retreat as they moved toward the airlock. The fight was on.